Okay. Uh, Good morning to everybody. My name is Frank Goldner. Next slide, please. In the next hour, you're going to hear from, in addition to myself, 3 other federal managers for various aspects of the fuels program that we're working under Topic 4, these subtopics. What you'll see is that we cover work for several areas throughout the Office of Nuclear Energy. So it's advanced fuels that can be used for many concepts that will be covered in other parts. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show you in the lower left corner, there's a heightened area. That's where our office is, the Office of Advanced Fuel Technologies. Our manager is Bill McCarthy, and we also work in John Carmack's, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Nuclear Fuel Cycle. But what I wanted to say is that our area is of use and value to other places on this chart. We are specifically focusing, of course, on the fuels that can be used in various reactor concepts, the light water concept, but also advanced concepts. And you'll hear from the various program managers about their view of the concepts to which they apply. I also want to point out that, like, if you look at the box below, chemical technologies and materials, there are other boxes that are dealing with advanced material development. We are focusing on materials associated with the fuel areas we have. So again, there are other boxes that we'll be presenting at other parts of this webinar that will cover various advanced reactors, and you'll see presentations on advanced materials, which are all very, very relevant. What we have is we have about an hour for presentations, and then there'll be time afterwards. I'd like to hold off questions until you've heard the 4 presentations. That keeps continuity, and we'll then have control of how many topics are left. Next subject, please. Next slide, please. Basically, we fit into a broad mission of advanced fuels, early stage development, and development that can help accelerate process. I'm going to talk about 2 areas now because we are changing. Up to now, the accident tolerant fuel was the dominant factor of this effort, and it probably still is. But we're introducing in the near future, in 24 and beyond, what we call next fuels, next generation fuels. And therefore, we're now going to focus, add a new focus area where some of the presentations you'll hear are in this area, the ones that deal with some of the demo concepts or other advanced reactor areas. So the first area I'll talk about deals with just the accident tolerant fuels. So I'll be focusing there on the fuels that are now associated with the accident tolerant fuel program as applied to the existing fleet of light water reactors. Whereas you'll see this next generation fuel concept takes some of the areas we are already working on and segregates them as applicable to advanced reactors of the future. And that doesn't rule out water reactors, but it opens up the door to all sorts of other concepts, as you'll hear. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the language, and you'll see this for each of the 4 presentations. You'll see the language that applies to our topic area. And this is language for accident tolerant fuels that we've applied for several years. I do note at the bottom that we think we're also applicable to the coming up generation of small reactors, SMRs. You know, that's up to 300 megawatt electric, 100 and larger. And so that's the accident tolerant fuel program. Next slide, please. Okay, the accident tolerant fuel program is the one you know about, so I'll just have one summary slide here. Basically, we're dealing with concepts that can enhance the performance under severe accidents in existing reactors, but also let them move ahead so that they can also be more useful in the power output they can do, in the utilization of the fuel resource. So in addition to the original 2 bullets on the second bullet, you'll see that we have doping as well as coating of the clads. And what we're opening the door, what we've now included in our program is also higher enrichment. As a matter of fact, we hope later on this calendar year to have lead test pins in several reactors with in at least one reactor with at least higher enrichment than this current 5% limitation. And along with that, having higher enrichment, you have your choice of using it to make more power, or you can use it to make more power by extending it over time. So obviously, these last 2 items open up the door for the existing fleet and their utilities to decide how they want to benefit from this additional enrichment that is being added, that we as part of our program have added to the program. Obviously, you know the companies that are involved in this, Framatome, Global Nuclear Fuels, and Westinghouse. And what's very important that I wanted to tell you is not only do we have new concepts, but we also, in my opinion, have created a very important laboratory infrastructure. And what I don't have here, which is why I'm talking to you all, is of course the value of the universities. I've noticed that in the 11 or 12 years since we started this program, we've had wonderful support and involvement from the universities, and that's why we consider ourselves such an important NEOP participant. I think we found students who have actually gotten jobs as a result of the work we support. They're working in new areas, and that's where I'll move on when I continue. But I just wanted to let you know that the accident tolerant fuel program proposals in this area should be focused very heavily if they can make a contribution to the existing concepts, either things that will open up longer lifetimes, higher burnups. Novel ideas we will talk about next, but right now the focus here is as had been in the past, and it's our hope that that slowly this program will not be the sole effort that we do in fuel cycle technologies for the existing fleet, but also how we expand even for the existing fleet. The future is very interesting. Next slide, please. Now this is this new area that we will be, I believe, a line item in the 25 fuel effort, in the 25 budget, which we're working on right now to stand up. But we have permission to at least socialize this area. Because it's a new area, its idea is to move concepts that are not just the near-term ones, but also have future applications. As you can see, the second bullet, the metallic fuel area, which you know we've done for the last couple of years, but it's also been, it's now going to be moved into this next generation fuels line item area, as well as the work you'll hear on silicon carbide related triso fuel. That will go into this new area also. And there's another area called molten salt fuels that you'll hear about that deals with a fuel that has tremendous potential for some of the advanced concepts under consideration. I mention these 3 areas in particular because although this next generation fuel area can open up to a lot of concepts, it's new, it's not going to have a huge amount of funding at the beginning. And so therefore, we flag these areas as the nearer next generation fuel items. Not that we're ruling out other stuff. If you have some ideas there and want to try it, but it may be easier for relevance and other things if in the near term these three areas, which you'll hear from, can contribute. As again, I don't rule out light water reactor concepts because I think there's wonderful things that can be still done for light water reactor fuel. There's ideas that we've thought about in the last 20 or 30 years, non-homogeneous concepts, advanced coolant, advanced methods of conducting energy out of the core. So there's a lot of possibility, but at least I think it's very exciting that we are now focusing on what I hope will become a significant effort in the future. But I'm giving you advance notice that we can entertain presentations that can think about the future in these areas. So that's exciting. Obviously, we hope the work we do can help reduce the time for new designs to come in, etc. Next slide, please. Now, I won't talk about these next two slides or so. I just wanted to let you know that in addition to the work we're doing with the universities, that we have this very well-developed laboratory system supporting us. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that, although I suspect many or most of you are. We have a tremendous capability that we've stood up for both steady state and transient capabilities, and I just wanted to put this in for background. Next slide, please. Another way of showing it is the test facilities at our major laboratories. Again, these are available, if not in the immediate, short time of the early NEOP proposals, they could be in your thoughts of how you might further develop them. And again, I strongly urge, in addition to considering talking to various advanced concept designers, also people at the laboratory. They can be a great help in near-term design. Next slide. And just as a reminder, there are NEOPs that have been done in all the areas you're hearing from today over the past years. This is just some that we put together for the accident-tolerant area, but you can see, so I strongly urge you to go into the NEOP site and to look what's been done in the past for work that you want to do, because we really are looking for extending with this next set, not just marginal increases or performance, but the door is open for new ideas, and that's what I wanted to let you know. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm now going to move to the next federal manager, Dr. Madeline Feltis, who will take up two areas that she can do sequentially. So she has quite a bit of time. So Madeline, the control is yours. You ask for the next slide when you want it, but we will delay questions again, if possible, until we've all done our presentations.
Morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. We have the silicon carbide cladding effort that was studied as part of the accident tolerant fuel program. And the idea is to provide high temperature performance in non-metallic cladding. And we have various vendors and working on this area, and we would like you to participate with them. So we are seeking proposals to enable the licensing of the silicon carbide cladding, namely thermohydraulic conditions, corrosion, and performance issues. And we are looking at these primarily for light water reactor applications. Silicon carbide is also being used for helium-cooled fast and thermal reactors. So the focus would be on non-destructive evaluation methods, NDE, quality assurance characterization techniques, and advances in the cladding fabrication methods. Next slide, please. So our subtopic basically is looking at silicon carbide cladding. I will also note that BWR channel box development also includes silicon carbide aspects, primarily because in boiling water reactors, the largest source or largest amount of zirconium metals is basically the channel box that surrounds each bundle. So again, silicon carbide is a long-term accident-tolerant fuel concept. We are looking at various vendors that are doing work, for instance, General Atomics, Framatome, Westinghouse, GE, and there are various small businesses that are working on this. So we really encourage you to potentially work with these nuclear industry partners, primarily because we have developed silicon carbide tubing methods and concepts that are not completely developed, but developed along. So, you know, if you want to do the latest thing since sliced bread, that's what you want to do. If you think you can make a new cladding concept, it's still better to work with these vendors and the small businesses. Research on chemistry and irradiation performance is important. We have the ability to test at MIT. We're working on this at the Idaho National Laboratory and also HIFER. So I'm going to mention that if you were to make samples or to work with these silicon carbide cladding or channel box materials, you could make the samples and apply for later NSUF, the National User Facility grants to actually get the irradiations and the PIEs done, because it is very hard to develop everything in 3 years, and we understand that. Advanced characterization methods and fuel performance modeling is very much needed. We have advanced modeling going on with the Los Alamos Lab and General Atomic and some of the other vendors. So your modeling capabilities would be appreciated to work with these vendors. And research for other silicon carbide structural applications, the BWR channel box performance, would be useful. Now, the comment here is that the channel box does not necessarily have to be hermetically sealed. Obviously, with fuel cladding, we have to be sure that we're not releasing any fission products, but the channel boxes don't have to be hermetic. So there is a means there to provide some technology, and we would hope that you would do it. Could you go to the next slide, please? The TRISO fuel program, the current program, has been focusing on gas-cooled reactor, TRISO, the fuel, the particle fuel, and we have a robust safety performance, irradiation testing performance from that program. And several companies are pursuing TRISO fuel for their advanced temperature reactor concepts. X-Energy, Kairos, BWXT, eVinci, Westinghouse is looking at this. But we are also considering in our new advanced generation fuels program to enable advanced TRISO concepts. So potential focus areas could include more information about the fuel and matrix properties. In a gas-cooled reactor, we have we have graphitic matrix, and but there are also vendors that are like UltraSafe or looking at silicon carbide matrix to surround the TRISO particles. They're also looking at TRISO particles in silicon carbide canisters. So we are working on advanced methods, and the idea here is that higher temperature refractory coatings could be used and useful here. We would like to have non-helium environments considered, and there would be new TRISO fuel forms and kernel compositions. I will mention this. Right now, we are using UCO, uranium oxycarbide, UCO. Previous gas-cooled reactors used UO2. But for instance, analysis could be done for mixed oxide fuel coming from spent nuclear fuel. There has been weapons-grade plutonium work that was done with the Russians years ago. So the reactor physics is important. It would be possible to use TRISO particles in gas-cooled reactors. That was historically done at the Peach Bottom 1 unit, which was a high-temperature gas reactor. So we are also interested in what new kernel compositions could be used that would retain the fission products. Could you go to the next slide, please? So again, as I mentioned, we are looking at the high temperature gas reactors. It's well understood and developed. But for instance, Kairos is looking at TRISO fuel in pebbles, smaller pebbles, using molten salt coolant. It's not the same as the molten salt coolant fuel where the fuel is flowing around. So this is just strictly a coolant. And so chemistry and irradiation performance in that environment is important to us. So you may propose some chemistry and performance research. And again, I mentioned the advanced TRISO work in terms of advanced fuel kernels, uranium nitride, MOX, transuranic materials for deep burn, and UO2 star and UCO star. UO2 star was a concept that General Atomics had many years ago, where there would be a getter layer put into the buffer. And again, characterization methods and PIE concepts would be appreciated. Would you please go to the next slide? I'm not going to go through these, but I'm going to remind people, do not duplicate previous NEOPs. We have a history of TRISO fuel projects and silicon carbide projects over the last few years. The TRISO program was as part of NE5, and it's being transitioned back to NE4, the Nuclear Fuels Group. So this slide just shows you some of the NEOPs. You can go to the NEOP, the INL period neop.gov site. I've given you the numbers here and the titles so that you can look at the abstracts. Some of these have completed project reports that you can look at, and your proposal will be looked at in terms of what's already been done. So if it is unique, we will find it. If it duplicates, we will see that too. So please be careful. Please go to the next slide. I go back all the way to the 2018 because we have projects there. And you will see that I include silicon carbide in here, as well as some of the other TRISO work. So please go to the NEOP website. You can look at nuclear fuels in the materials area, and you will see various slides. So I tried to glean these from the NEOP website. Please go to the next slide. So here we've gone back to 2015. I will make a comment that we have some Marmot and Bison work that was done to try to get a better silicon carbide based analysis. The hardest part about modeling is to get the correct information in silicon carbide compositions. So it would be important to go and work with like General Atomics, Framatome, Westinghouse, etc. And Lanel has been working on the weave problem with the and looking at what happens as we have different conditions. So if you could look at these NEOPs, that would be appreciated. You can go to the next slide. And this is where Ken gets to have the fun. Go ahead, Ken.
Alrighty. So I work in the area of metallic fuels and experimentation. So the baseline of our metallic fuels interest is the EBR2 experimental breeder reactor design. It's a fast reactor, and the basic design, is a uranium zirconium alloy clad in stainless steel. So programmatically, we are looking at establishing a licensing baseline for that basic fuel to assist vendors and licensees to get the fuel licensed. And so we're very focused on sodium fast reactors, metal fuels. So first of all, this is wide open. If you want to be creative, and there's a lot of ways to do nuclear power, a lot of ways to do fast, different coolants, different fuel designs. We're open to all of it, but I'll let you know what we might resonate with more. Some interesting points. Frank showed kind of our experiment suite, our various facilities. You might notice there's not a fast reactor in there, but our scientists have been very good at compensating and figuring out experiments to do without a fast spectrum, artificially creating it in a way, in shielding out thermal neutrons in broad spectrum reactors. And we also have a program called FAST, which is Fission Accelerated Steady State Test. What it is we use very small samples, and as you scale the size of fuel down and maybe increase some fissile content, you can get any kind of linear heat rate you want, and the mean free path of the neutrons goes across the full fuel. And it's pretty amazing. We've got some results where you look at a cross section of a very small fuel sample, and it looks to scale, looks very similar to full scale fuel rods. So just be aware of some of the techniques we're using. Also interesting in the news is Japan is coming back, and they're going to be restarting their Joyo reactor. They also are in the throes of designing a commercial fast reactor demonstration, fairly large engineering scale reactor, I think 600 megawatts electric. And they have not down selected metal fuel versus oxide fuel. So Japan is very interested in working with us, and they're right now pretty aggressively exploring whether or not they will go with metal fuels, which of course the United States, at least Department of Energy, is very interested. We also have several demo reactors that are using the EBR2-like fuel for their funded demonstrations. And that these current concepts are being designed on the table as a once through, burn your fuel up as efficiently and economically as you can, and then store it for disposal. Therefore, there's a strong incentive for our metal fuels to no longer have sodium bonding. And so these reactors, I believe all of them will be starting up with sodium bonded fuel, but they would like as soon as possible to transition to fuel without sodium bonding. That causes some problems. For example, manufacturing capabilities and precision. With sodium bonding, you can get away with quite a lot of tolerance errors. One other point on that, no one's bragging about our current manufacturing processes for metal fuels. It's kind of a one-off injection casting, using just lots of waste with the molds and things like that. So there's a huge opportunity for improving our fuel manufacturing capabilities. And let me just see if there's anything. All right, next slide, please. So this just reiterates what I was talking about. We have our basic EBR2 fuel baseline. That's what we want to work from. We want to establish that strongly, support reactors getting licensed in that area, and then evolving from there. but we are open to radical ideas. You know, you want to do something with lead-based, lead coolant, things like that. You know, there's interest in that. It's also possible. Just letting you know our base. As I mentioned, our manufacturing processes definitely can use improvement, and so we're pretty interested in high volume, high throughput manufacturing processes, both for sodium clad fuel as well as sodium free. The sodium bonded fuel, I misspoke. The sodium bonded fuel does have lower the tolerances don't need to be as tight, so be a little more forgiving for maybe a fast throughput manufacturing process. Fuel cladding chemical interaction is the limiting factor on our fuel, not so much as burn up. So as Madeline mentioned on hers about beware of repeating NEUPs, we have awarded NEUPs looking at the fuel cladding chemical interaction in the guise of coatings, doing lining the inside of the cladding with coatings, as well as using getters. But don't drop an idea just because your title is similar to an old one. If you do, take a look at detail to make sure, and then in your proposal show what you're offering. You know, it might be a similar thing, you know, some kind of liner, and just try to clearly up front demonstrate why your approach is unique and worth funding. And that's about it. I think that's all I had now. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry. Sorry. If you go back. So cladding, you know, we have the HT9 basic, but cladding variants are fine. Look at different claddings. The fuel makeup, you know, we got the U10 Zirc. That is not written in stone because, you know, if we do go to reprocessing fuel, you know, UPU makeup, and also there's nothing magic about 10% zirconium. That's our baseline we're working from, so we can deviate from that. And heterogeneous fuel options aren't really mentioned with and without the cladding. For example, sodium fast reactor fuel might fail near the top. So maybe instead of putting one homogeneous slug of metal down in there to fuel it, you know, maybe we vary it and we back off a little bit on the top of the fuel pins. That's what I mean by heterogeneous fuel options. I haven't seen any proposals on that. So that's something you might want to look into. So now I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Now we have Dr. James Willett, who will cover an area that has great importance to many new concepts being considered in the other parts of NE. This again is an example that you see a topic area that we have, a subtopic area, which has bearing to many other concepts. So that's why this is also included. Dr. Willett, please.
Good morning, good afternoon. Molten salt fuels in this area or subtopic, we're specifically looking at cases where the fuel is dissolved in a molten salt, as opposed to like the Kairos, where it's a solid fuel and the molten salt is simply used as the heat transfer medium. In this case, the salt is the primary coolant and the heat transfer media. This, I guess, would also include the Moltex concept, where the molten salt fuel is contained in essentially fuel rods, and there's a separate molten salt phase that does the heat transfer as well. Anyway, this is different from the work that's being done under NE5 in the reactor area, where they're much more concerned about the performance of the fuel in the reactor. This topic is more focused on manufacturing the fuel, synthesizing it, characterizing it, making sure that it meets the specifications that will be provided by the different vendors. Several different vendors are both molten chloride and molten fluoride reactors. We realized last couple of years that there is a big need for understanding the process chemistry and for both making this fuel as well as on the back end as well. What do you do with it when the fuel has reached its end of life and you want to recover the useful parts of it and dispose of the non-useful parts? So we had a workshop that was held at Argonne in 2023 to look at these specific things, the molten salt fuel cycle chemistry R&D needs. I think there were about 80 people in attendance. And interestingly, I asked for a show of hands on how many people were, it was National Lab and university and some industry people, how many people there had benefited from or were currently funded by or their graduate work was funded by the NIA program. And I would say probably 60, 70% of the room raised their hands. So we're seeing the benefit in terms of the faculty, students, industry employees benefiting from the NIA programs. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background. Suppose a solid fuel reactors, which are two-phase systems. In this case, the fuel is a molten salt. Typically, it's single phase, where the fuel and the coolant are combined in a single circulating phase. So therefore, the qualification is going to be different from a solid fuel. It's going to focus much more on maintaining thermophysical, thermochemical, and neutronic properties within acceptable ranges at startup, during preparations, as well as during operation. So there's an emphasis much more on, there's a big, large program in measuring that Ted Bestman heads up on measuring and cataloging thermochemical and thermophysical properties. Some of this work would be related to that or benefit from that. But a qualification is much it's going to be different than qualifying a new solid fuel rod. We're looking at different properties. As long as the thermochemical, thermophysical properties stay within a control region that the safety case is based on, the fuel is going to be acceptable. But we need to make sure that we start off with an acceptable region, parameter values, as well as maintain them during operation. Some systems, all systems will require removal of fission gases because it's not contained in sealed pins. So the whole issue of dealing with fission gas removal, it would not be part of this topic. That would be covered under the topics under reactors. Some systems do require continuous or periodic treatment of the fuel for sustained operation, particularly with the thorium thermal spectrum cycles. Next slide, please. The other thing interesting about molten salt fuels is their reactor concepts are a lot of times envisioned as sort of omnivorous or garbage disposal, to take spent fuel from other reactor systems that have the fissile from that and incorporate it into a molten salt fuel to burn down the transuranics for just recover the energy contained in them, and so they do not have to be disposed of in a long-term geological repository. So because you're looking at fissile material from several different sources, there's multiple chemical processes that are required to convert it to a chloride or a fluoride system. And that can either be done where you're synthesizing the fissile as a pure phase, you're making UCl3 or UF4, UF3, or whether you're doing that synthesis and you're preparing those fissile halides in a molten salt solution directly. So they do not necessarily have to be done as a pure phase. Sometimes it's easier to do it within a molten salt. But these conversion processes have to be simple, scalable, robust. We don't want to generate a lot of waste. They need to be able to handle irradiated and non-irradiated fissile sources. So the radiated ones, it has to be able to be performed within a shielded, inert atmosphere hot cell facility. So the front end of fuel cycle development emphasize both understanding control of the solution chemistry as well as the chemical process engineering, something that works at the benchtop that you would never think of scaling up is not something that would generate a lot of interest. So conversions synthesis, processing, separations need to be things that could be scaled up, as well as we're looking at the back end of the fuel cycle, removing fission products. Ideally, we want to just remove the fission products, the matrix salt, whether it's FLiBe or some alkaline earth metal chloride. Ideally, you'd like to recycle that, particularly if it's a chloride, because it's either been enriched in chlorine 37 to avoid chlorine 36, or if it's used natural chlorine 36 has built up, and we want to keep that chloride in the reactor. So ideally, you want to remove the fission products as for chloride reactor as non-chloride species. Uranium could then be either recycled back into fresh fuel for molten salt reactor or handed off for re-enrichment. So both options need to be possible. Next slide. So if you look at the fuel cycle chemistry workshop report, the link is provided below. We summarized the current state of the art and identified R&D needs. R&D needs were grouped under 9 headings. One is conversion of fuel sources to salt. That would be ranging from things coming off the enrichment line as either UF6 or UF4 to spent oxide fuel, metal fuel, nitride fuel, purifying the fresh fuel salt, particularly with respect to oxygen and water and other impurities as well. Scaling up the fuel synthesis, incorporating packaging and delivery. You want to be able to package it, deliver it, interface the fuel container with your reactor system, characterizing the fuel and qualifying it, making sure that it does have the proper viscosity, composition, thermal conductivity, heat capacity, all those parameters in the liquid state. Recovering noble metal and insoluble fission products. And this leaks into reactor space a little bit, but it does apply to the synthesis as well. Safeguard approaches for liquid fuels and fuel cycle facilities. So if you're making the fuel or you're recycling the fuel, you need to be able to monitor do your material control and accountability to know where the fissile material is and that you're meeting safeguards requirements. So these proposals should clearly identify the challenges being addressed and how the proposed activities will advance the technology. We really want to focus on things that do move the needle in the TRL space. I believe that is the last slide. Back to you, Frank. So I'll keep talking. So this area, this slide here shows the contacts for the different federal program managers in different areas for the fuels.
I'm sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I wanted to use this as kind of an end slide or next to end slide. So you see here the federal project managers for a broad area of fuels, from those that are applicable to the existing fleet to those that are applicable to our support of new and advanced designs and new concepts. I hope this has given you an idea. I think I have one extra slide.
Frank, can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Go back to the contact slide. If you do contact us and ask a question, we need to set up a question and answer that shows up on the NEOP website. Drew can correct me if I'm wrong, because we cannot give unfair advantage to a particular applicant. So sending us your concept and talking it through and trying to, hype it for us, doesn't really help. But if you have a question, please be sure to ask and understand that we have to share that question and answer to the entire NEOP applicant pool. So Drew may and the NEOP team may want to make a comment about that on how to put that question. Either you can do that directly to the NEOP website or to us as individuals. Again, we have to have a fair playing field. I hope that helps everyone understand what happens.
And one comment and errata, and on here there's a couple errors. My email, Ken Keller, my Keller is spelled Kellar, so it ends in AR. And Daniel Wax, is the last A should be an E, DANIEL.Wax. There you go.
Yeah, and thanks, Madeline, for that. I think the easiest way to do this is the email neup@inl.gov, and that way we can help facilitate that question and answer. That way we're just making sure that you're not revealing any information that you don't want to the general public, and then that we can facilitate the question to the right program manager. And so I think that's the best way to do it. You can also reach out at these spaces, and but be aware that Frank, Madeline, Ken, Jim, and Don are all going to be feeding those back to the NEOP office to post. So that's just for general information.
And we will try to respond as quickly as possible. So, don't worry about sending it to the NEOP team because they work very efficiently and quickly. So we will get our answers back to you as soon as possible.
I apologize for typos.
Well, what we'll do, Frank, is we'll correct those typos before we post these out there. So we've noted it.
Okay. There was one last slide that Madeline suggested, again, just to give you an idea that there are also SBIRs that apply to our various areas. And again, this gives you some of the ideas of the ones that are silicon carbide related, but there are SBIRs for other areas, which I think you also can find in one of the websites. Is that right?
Right. You can, there's a small business site that is operated by the Office of Science. You can see, it's like a needle in a haystack, but you can search under the word TRISO and then silicon carbide under the nuclear energy SBIRs, and you can find out information. I've provided the list for the silicon carbide because we've had a lot of work that has been done. And the SBIR company's contact information is available there. But if you do want to specifically work with an SBIR company, please ask Drew or ping me, and I can get the contact information for our vendors, for instance, for silicon carbide work and the SBIRs, and we have to put that again on the website. So you will see that there's been a lot of work that has been done. Thank you.
Okay, Drew, I think now we can be open for the question period if there are any, or people, if you want to tell people how to ask. Or
yeah, and Frank, before we do that, I maybe want to say one additional item, something that Madeline mentioned during her presentation. There is the option, and it may be of interest to folks on this call, for the NSUF work scope. Madeline was referring to if you need, irradiation plus PIE or some version of that, ion irradiations, those types of things, that you could use both this work scope if you were proposing just the research portion, or you could use the NSUF-1 work scope that allows you to propose something in this fuels area that is tied to NSUF access as well. And so I just wanted to be clear about the pathway that you would take if you're looking for irradiation access in one of these fuels focused projects.
And please note that the CINR, the entire solicitation has information about NSUF, and your samples have to be ready. So in your proposal, you could mention, oh, we're going to make samples, da 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 da, and we will have them ready in like year 2 or year 3. We will either begin some irradiations in our own reactor, but if you intend to use an NSUF facility like ATR Haifa, MIT, I could go down the list. You will still have to compete that. It's not a given that you can automatically get an NSUF grant. If you work with a vendor, they could work with you to get your samples and get a gain voucher. But again, it's competitive. So please plan wisely.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Madeline.
Okay, we're going to open up to questions and answers. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. All questions and answers will be transcribed and posted on the nup.gov website after this week is over. Okay, open to questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. This is Professor Subhash from University of Florida. I'm inquiring whether development of tools for 6-SiC composite tubing for detection of corrosion is that of relevance to this project? Is of relevance
I think that would be a good idea. You may want to look at the NEUP list and work with the fuel vendor, because we do have, for instance, autoclave testing that's being done, like for heat up at Westinghouse, and General Atomics has their work being done at Westinghouse. And we have some corrosion testing planned at MIT. But if you have a specific technique that is new, we would be happy to try to use it. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, you have your hand up, but you're muted.
Yeah, I was just kind of waiting. I didn't want to step on anyone. So I'm Adam Burek from the University of Michigan. We have a broad spectrum of molten salt capabilities, like purification, stuff like that. So I was just wondering, looking at the guidance document, the MSR fuel cycle document, is there a sorting of any sort? Which priority is higher or anything? Because we could focus on qualification, we could focus on purification of already made fuel, we could focus on synthesis of fuel. So I was just kind of wondering, is there any sort of priority to these things?
I would say no, and it's also possible that some activities might check several boxes. So it doesn't have to be just pick one thing and show how your work benefits that. If there's a coordinated effort that that checks multiple boxes, that's not forbidden at all. So I think that may be part of what you were getting at.
Correct. Mostly I was just looking for, is anyone more important than the other? But it seems like they're all kind of generally important.
Right. Yeah. If you read the report, there's some more details in that.
Right.
You may be familiar with that. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jianqi, and I'm from the University of Illinois. And follow-up add-on question, also related to the molten salt fuel. So I'm wondering that are you interested in the surrogate salt or the base salt instead of add the uranium into the salt?
what do you mean by you said the surrogate salt?
Yeah, like just the flab or the sodium nitrite chloride, those kind of salt, not add the uranium.
I mean, that has to be, to the extent that can be purchased, in high quality from vendors, that's one thing, but ensuring and verifying that it does, that it meets spec, that it is dry, has no water in it, that the impurity levels are acceptable.
I would suggest that, for instance, with the non-fueled FLIBE salt, you could contact Kairos. Their licensing information is also available on the NRC website, and there's some general information about their FLIBE and the constituents, their actual list of what contaminants or concentrations of non-FLIBE stuff that they would consider is something that you may want to talk with them about. And I think that would be a good idea because, again, it's not just the FLIBE, the fluoride, the lithium, and the beryllium, but it's the small contaminants that can suck up neutrons or attack the pebbles that would be interesting. So in that case, you may want to do a Google or Bing search about the Kairos reactor. You go to the NRC website and see some of the documentation there. And the ACRS, the Committee for Reactor Safeguards, asked similar questions in their reviews, and you can go to the ACRS transcripts to see that. So it's not a mystery, but you'll have to do some homework.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, and it would be important to, when you're preparing things, that the constituents are sufficient purity, but there's also going to be some purification probably as it's assembled as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Well, if I don't see any more, if we don't get any more questions, again, just, we cover a whole bunch of interesting areas, both for existing concepts, but also for concepts for the future. And I think that's the important thing to remember, underlying that we have a wonderful laboratory infrastructure that one can go to for questions, samples, etc. And there are the players, both in the light water reactor area, but in the advanced area. That I think there'll be quite a few other presentations during this 2-day series that will cover other reactor concepts. And of course, we are indirectly supporting them, maybe even key, because of that we're concentrating on the fuel itself. And as I said, there's a lot of good advanced material work in several of the other efforts that you will hear about in the next day or two.
Looks like we have one more question from Adam.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. If
You can.
If you guys have time, I'd ask a few more.
Yeah, we set aside a lot of times because we know we get many questions.
Yeah, if you have a series of questions, go right ahead.
Okay, so again, for molten salt fuels, is there a particular feedstock that's of interest? I know out of the mines you may get U3O8 or some oxide fuel, but in our lab we typically get metallic uranium, and so we would probably design our synthesis around metallic uranium, but we could just as easily get oxide and use that to make fuel. Or my
question is, let's think about this. Depending on your university, which university are you from?
University of Michigan.
Okay, so you don't need a hot cell if it's unirradiated, obviously. The preferred oxide form is UCO. Okay, so if you're looking at doing this with like TRISO in FLIBE, there are a couple ways of doing this well. Okay.
I was particularly interested in molten salt fuels.
Okay. I'll let Jim answer that one. Thank you.
We actually do have hot cells in my group, so
yeah,
we can.
I know you do. It's just an idea that we don't want to contaminate any grad students or any university, so be careful.
That's the goal.
Right. I know that you can go out to vendors and buy UCl4. I think in UF4. UCl3 is more difficult to obtain. And if it's a chloride molten salt reactor, they're going to run on exclusively or very dominated by UCl3 because of the corrosion issues with UCl4. So converting things to UCl3 either as a pure phase or in a salt solution, I guess, would be in a place that in a way that's clean, that doesn't generate waste, that's scalable. I mean, obviously, way to do it, if you're talking oxide, would be okay. You can convert to metal, then we'll chlorinate it. But is there a direct way to do it from the oxide? Or if converting fluoride to chloride. And other, the chemistry of going from oxides to fluorides and fluorides back to oxides is well established in terms of the conversion and deconversion chemistry, but it's been done at industrial scale. But we're trying to get the other and there's typical sort of a lot of this is built on to some degree our experience in pyro processing. But in that case, the salt is the process fluid. It's not the end product. It's what you run things through to do your separations. And in this case, we're looking at the salt as the product. We're not going from metal to metal or oxide to metal through a molten salt. We're looking at dirty salt to clean salt, oxide to salt, metal to salt, carbide, whatever, to salt. So there's lots of different additional paths that I think can be developed rather than falling into the or develops historical ones. Although if they're appropriate, that's fine.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Jim, I have a question for you. Is there an appropriate oxide non-uranium based constituent that could be used, like cerium oxide or something like that, so that you could get the chemistry effects without having uranium at a lab at a university? Just a question.
Yeah, that would depend on the chemistry. If the chemistry of thermodynamics is similar to uranium, that would be one thing. I would say if doing with a surrogate is such a case that if we can do it with material A, doing it with uranium would be easier. So that's.
I agree. The idea here is that a surrogate, just a suggestion, a surrogate could be used for some of the process development before you start trying to get a whole bunch of uranium in your,
right.
And hit the limits for your university assay limits. Just a thought.
Yeah, right.
Again, we don't want to have any graduate students contaminated or lab contaminated. You can tell I used to work at a university. We used to have interesting things happen at the Brazil reactor facility. Once in a while, a student would do something interesting. So we don't want to have
and sometimes these are, areas if you don't have that capability, you try to partner up with one of the national labs that does have that capability.
Right.
So.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Our current license is something like 20 kilograms of DU. So for our group,
yeah, you guys are lucky. Not every university has that capability.
Yeah, when we brought on Stephen Raymond, he kind of fought for being able to use a lot of uranium, so we do.
Yeah, and the charge for the priority of the different tasks. Some of that is set by the time frame of the needs for the developers. Some of them getting ready to apply for NRC licenses and things like that, so they're going to want to be able to demonstrate that they can do certain things. So that's the priority I see is set, in some ways by that. So I would talk to the different vendors as well. That would, if something is a higher priority for them that this work aligns with, I would imagine that it would strengthen the proposal.
Thank you.
That's it, Adam?
I had one more question.
Yeah.
I
Go
feel like I
ahead.
don't want to rattle them off. I want to give other people time to ask questions.
Is if folks will raise their hands if they have a question. Otherwise, Adam, just keep rolling.
So the next question is for fuel qualification or characterization. Are there particular properties that are more of interest? So we're working on putting a proposal together with Melissa Rose, and she's given us some insight. But also, I know the work Ted's doing, and so I'm just wondering: is there a certain set of properties that are more interesting for fuel qualification? I assume density may not be the most interesting thing to qualify a fuel. You know what I mean? But
Well, density, viscosity, all those. I think there's it's a heat transfer, it's the pumping, it's the neutronics, it's gas solubility, all those. There's a report out. I believe the lead author was Dave Holcomb. I'm familiar with that, on sort of the posing an approach towards how would you qualify a molten salt fuel. And
You could give either in the chat or answer the question with the exact Holcomb report.
Yeah.
I know which one you're talking about, but that would be useful for folks not to
that
try
would
to
be.
reinvent a wheel.
Yeah, that would be, if I was making a fuel, I think this is what you would need to do. And then David has done a wonderful effort in sort of collecting all different properties, and a lot of it really is tied more to the safety basis. The vendors still need to know what the properties are, because they need to make assumptions about sizing heat exchangers and pumps and things like that. But it's there's the reactor performance, and then there's reactor safety, and licensing is going to focus more on the safety, and the vendors have to show their design will perform with the fuel as specified. I will look for that report.
Okay. I think that's it for my questions. I think I'm familiar with that Holcomb report, but once you put it in the chat, I'll verify. I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll hand this over to Drew for some closing comments.
Okay, I think thanks to all the fuel folks for providing such a comprehensive overview. I think what I want to highlight is what was highlighted in these slides, which is I hope this has given you a good overview and opportunity to see what's going on, what the priorities are at DOE for these specific areas. What I will say, echoing what Frank said, is I hope this has given you ideas, and also to recognize that if you have unique ideas that are innovative, different, that those are welcome too. And we would like you just to make sure that anything that you propose, that it's not duplicative of work that's already been done, that you build off of the work of others. And I think that as we go forward, that's why this fuels area is so broad, to both capture kind of the current state of the art and the future, as Frank put it so well. I will note a couple of things as we go forward. These slides and this session will be posted online. We will continue to take questions through the funding opportunity process. And so if you do have questions, please extend those to the integration office. We have an email that's checked constantly, neup@iml.gov, that we can forward your questions to the appropriate program manager, get you the answers you need as we go forward. As a reminder, we have an upcoming letter of intent deadline for the funding for the NSUF portion that we discussed briefly in this question and answer session. That's on June 5th. We also have a pre-application deadline for this topic area 4 area on June 26th. And so looking forward to seeing your applications. Please reach out if you have additional questions. And with that, I'd just like to thank our program managers once again, and we can wrap this session up.